Right, and Professor, of course, this war has been, in more ways than one, a war of unintended consequences. And the Strait of Hormuz is just one example. Now, with Donald Trump's approval ratings at an all-time low and his apparent frustration with its allies telling them to fetch your own oil or buy from the United States, as Shivan was just mentioning. Now, given all of this, I just want to understand, what does it mean for the transatlantic alliance going forward from here? Because we understand that this is not spelling, very well for Donald Trump at this point, either domestically or on the geopolitical stage.
Well, clearly, Donald Trump's, social media post this morning lashing out at NATO countries demonstrates that he is very upset with them. And now the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is saying the United States is going to reconsider its relationship with NATO. Donald Trump was always leaning in that direction. But of course, if he tears up the NATO alliance, that's a huge victory for Vladimir Putin and a huge victory for China. This is their dream come true. So I suspect at some point before the United States moves in that direction to pull out of NATO, this reality is going to dawn upon him, and he would suffer a lot of pushback and criticism in the United States for destroying one of the most powerful military alliances ever constructed and handing a victory to Vladimir Putin. So I don't think he'll go that far. I think this is just a president who's acting like a spoiled brat. When he can't get his way, he lashes out and he throws a temper tantrum. Eventually, he'll calm down, and I suspect the NATO alliance will remain intact.
But, Professor, when you look at the statements that came out from the Western countries, and these are unprecedented statements coming out. Spain had made it clear from the beginning, we will not allow our bases to be used by US jets. Then comes Italy saying we will not allow your jets to land in our bases. France says you will not even allow you to use our airspace. UK says we will not get sucked into this war with the US. These are statements coming out by their core partnership in the West. The fractures that have already been caused by this war, do you feel, even if the NATO alliance remains intact on paper, does it really have that kind of impact or psychological impact in terms of war? Article 5, you attack one nation, they all come for you. Has that image completely been destroyed after what we're seeing?
Well, I wouldn't say completely destroyed. NATO was, let's remember, was put together to really protect Europe. And they're united on the question of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. When it comes to the Middle East, that's really not NATO's area of interest. But of course, the facts that you just mentioned, the criticisms, the refusal of these very close allies of the United States to back his war in the Middle East does not bode well for the NATO alliance, because it suggests there's deep divisions among these members. But let's remember, they're not fighting over Europe. They're fighting over this disastrous war that everyone realizes was completely unnecessary, is illegal under international law, and it was poorly executed, and now, is clearly unraveling before our eyes. And so I think all of those countries in Europe that you just mentioned are trying to protect their own interests, their own image, and distance themselves from the disaster in the Persian Gulf that's unfolding before us.
And Professor, if we can just extend that a little bit more, in your appreciation, does America have any friendly allied nation left with it other than Israel at this point?
Well, of course, it has those allies that are part of this, right-wing populist international that are sort of just devotees of Donald Trump. So Viktor Orban in Hungary, Argentina, you mentioned Israel, arguably Prime Minister Modi in India. Countries like that, I think, lean in Donald Trump's direction. They're considered part of an alliance. But you're right. I think it's very noteworthy and correct of you to highlight deep fractures and divisions within the Western alliance. It doesn't bode well for the future of NATO. And of course, no one is more happier at this moment than Vladimir Putin. He would love to see the NATO alliance continue to splinter along these lines, because it makes his policies in Ukraine much more easier to prosecute.
Right, Professor, and we've been hearing for weeks now when Donald Trump is claiming that Iran is begging for a deal, which Iran has continued to flatly reject. And it was essentially between the 15 points that were presented by Washington and the 5 demands which Iran laid out. But now we're hearing something completely different. And Donald Trump has said that they can essentially pull out of Iran without a deal being there. Now, it only adds to the mistrust that both the nations have, with each other. How do you think that is going to pan out from Iran, given the current statements that are coming out?
Yeah, so I think Iran realizes that the longer this war drags on, the more that they are in the driver's seat. And Donald Trump is vulnerable here, both domestically in the United States and also because of the effects of the global economy that this war is unleashed. From Iran's perspective, they want to get out from under the sanctions that has devastated their economy and have created instability and a popular revolt. They want, I think, to drag this war out for as long as possible where they can get a grand bargain from the United States. I don't know if Donald Trump is prepared to do that. If the United States unilaterally just declares victory and pulls out, Iran can claim, well, that it has won this war because the regime wasn't toppled, it's remained in place. And then it will start to, I predict, use its control of the Straits of Hormuz to charge a tax for international shipping to go through that strait to compensate it for the war. The other point to remember is that Donald Trump can declare an end to the war, but when you start a war, the other side also has a vote. So Iran can still hit American targets, American allies, still hit Israel. And the war will continue, and then that'll force Donald Trump's hand. Either does he go back into the Middle East and try to bomb Iran further? That's one likely scenario, and I suspect it's one that we can possibly see, because Iran does not want to be in a position that it was in last summer after the 12-day June war, where it agreed to a ceasefire, and then 6 months later it got attacked again. It wants to prevent that from happening, and so I think it's going to try and use the leverage it has over the Straits of Hormuz to try and get a better deal.
Professor Hashemi, thank you so much for making time for us, and hopefully 2 to 3 weeks down the line, we will see an end to this war. We can only hope this is the final timeline. Professor Hashemi joining us from Washington.
Thank you.